Today's topic, I want to address something that I encountered a lot. So, those of you who don't know, I've done a lot of consultation in my career working with families. As I shared, I've done a lot of couples counseling, but I've also worked in hospitals. I've worked with youth. I've done outpatient counseling. I've worked with military. I've worked in a lot of different community based settings. And one thing I have encountered a lot, and it's specifically for families who have children in the school setting. But this is really a topic I think can be applied even if you're an adult and you're contending with a medical condition. And this is a question that you're asking yourself when you're interfacing with the hospital, for instance, or your care providers. But today I'm going to narrow it down. I'm going to be speaking about and to parents who have children with special needs. And I want to highlight this idea of how do you get from a no to a yes? What do I mean? So, one thing that I encountered a lot, I would have people reaching out to me and asking, I want the school to find out what other services are available for my child. I want the school to do an evaluation to see what's going on with my child academically. I want to see what resources are available, but I'm asking the school and I'm not hearing anything. I've called them. I've gone to the school and I've asked. I've reached out to the teachers. I've talked to administrators, and everybody tells me that they're doing what they can do. And there's nothing else that would be, that's available for my child. Or maybe, yes, we're going to do an evaluation. Yes, we're going to put these measures in place, but it's frustrating for you because you don't see the fruit of the agreement. You don't see what you're being told is available for your child, or you don't even know what's available. You just know that your child needs more help because you see it in their grades. They're struggling academically. Maybe their behaviors are affecting their ability to be successful. It could be emotions. Maybe their emotions are affecting their ability to be successful in the classroom. I have had parents say, my child is a good kid. They're not interrupting class. There's just not any challenges, maybe in terms of behaviorally. They're doing the best that they can. We're staying after school. We're doing tutoring if that's even available. I'm asking the teacher to reach out to me if assignments aren't being turned out. I'm doing all the things I think I know to do. And they're telling me that they're going to do some extra things, but I haven't noticed it. They're telling me that they're going to refer them to additional academic support, or they're going to coordinate a meeting with the teachers, and that hasn't been done. They're sharing with you their resources that will be available, but ultimately they aren't, and you see that. And so you're frustrated and you're tired and discouraged. And for some of you, it's not that you give up, it's that you don't know where else to turn. And for others, it's, I'm going to continue knocking at that door, but it seems futile because I'm asking, I'm doing all the things, and it doesn't seem like it's helping my child. And so, how do you get those no's? It feels like no's, right? Because it's not yielding the results that you're looking for, to the yes. And honestly, I've had parents who've said to me, the school just flat out said, no, your child doesn't need an evaluation. No, they just need to go see this provider. And God forbid, I've heard stories where parents have said, the teachers told me that my child just needs some medication. And that's not to devalue the benefit to accessing medical treatment in the way that is appropriate for your child with a provider who's got the medical expertise to do that, right? We all want to operate in the scope of our expertise. And it is appropriate for a teacher to indicate that there are some concerns, and that maybe starting with your primary care doctor or physician could be helpful, but wholly inappropriate for someone who's non-medical to give your child a medical diagnosis without the appropriate medical credential. So I've had families who've shared things like that. And they're telling you, this is what's going to be helpful, but you're not getting the help that you need. And so when you're told no, it might feel like it's a door slammed. Now, what do I do? Well, I want to tell you what you can do. There are some things that you can do. With that being said, I want to give you an example. And so going back to that story of families who I've worked with, imagine if you will, for example, you have a child who is maybe 8 years old. You've noticed the first few years of school, maybe they're in the second or third grade around that time. They've struggled, right? You've done some tutoring with them. You've hired the tutors. You've noticed they've had some challenges, maybe in reading or math. You have your suspicions, and maybe they're just eking by. Maybe, right? This is just an example because some children, it's obvious that they're not even meeting that benchmark. It's just a challenge. But there are some kids who are maybe just eking by, and it's because the parent, maybe they're putting in all of these supports to really help them be successful. But think about it. You're paying for the tutoring. You're staying up late into the evening to make sure that maybe they're not just turning the material in, but they're doing it successfully, that it's right, that you're reviewing it. You're putting in all of these academic supports that maybe aren't being had in the school setting just to get them to meet minimally the benchmark. Those are kind of some clues that your child needs perhaps an evaluation for that extra support. Another clue might be your child is struggling. It's just obvious academically. The grades aren't meeting those benchmarks. The test measures aren't meeting those benchmarks. And you recognize that they're in need of more specialized support to help them to meet those benchmarks, to make those grades that are going to demonstrate that they've acquired the skills to be proficient in certain areas so that they can move forward to the next class. And so some parents will tell me, I've done those things. I've recognized, I've asked for help. I've called them. No one calls me back. I showed up. I went to the school and I spoke to principal such and such. And I spoke to one child's teacher. I went to parent teacher. I scheduled a parent meeting. I'm on the email list with the teacher and I reached out and I sent an email, but it doesn't seem like my child is getting that support or even the evaluation, the testing that I think would be helpful to see what is going on. Now, let me pause here. I understand that what I'm about to share is, all right, this is 2025 and we're in the month of July. And there's a lot of things that are happening and being spoken of in terms of the status of the Department of Education and what will be or will not be. So I'm going to speak from the place of what is available right now. And as things evolve and change, and we'll address that. But if that's something you want to address now, comment below, let me know, because I'd be happy to kind of talk about what some of those conversations, as I know, as I'm learning with you, but things that are being shared, how that might affect your rights, right? Because your child has rights. And as a parent who has a child with special needs, you have rights as well. And there's nuance to that in each state. So there's federal law for that. And then there's nuance to that and how that's clarified in each state, all under the Individuals with Disability Education Act. So I just want to throw that out there because for those of you in the future who reach and you get this video, things might look different a few months from now, a few weeks from now. But for today, we're going to address it as is and what your rights are and what's available to you. So that being said, I always encourage parents to ask for an evaluation. Now, it might be called something slightly different in your state. Some states called it a child study, child find. They're usually around that kind of terminology. You can go to your state's Department of Education website. You can go to Department of Education website.gov and look for your state and click on it and it'll take you to your state's website. Again, I'd love to do a video and show you how to find those things. If that's something you think would be helpful, let me know down below. But that's essentially what you're going to do. You're going to ask for a child study. If you use that language, most are still going to know what you're referencing. They might just help you clarify if it's a little bit different language in your state. But essentially, you're asking for an evaluation to determine if your child is eligible for special education services. Now, sometimes in the state, and again, some of this is going to be nuanced for your state. So I'm speaking in general. And of course, if I haven't said it yet, now, and it will be in the links below, you're going to want to consult your state for how those regulations show up. So there's federal law. And again, then those laws can get clarified, become more nuanced based on the state in which you reside. So that's where things can start to look a little bit different based on the federal guidance. You're going to be asking your school for a child find an evaluation. Sometimes they want to see, well, what types of interventions can we put in place first to see if those would be helpful prior to doing the child study. And so you might have a meeting after that if you can get your teachers and administrators, whoever that special education coordinator is in your school. Sometimes it's the assistant principal who's assigned. It might be a case manager who kind of works over that. Just again, that can look different in your school and your state, but you're going to be asking for that. Sometimes they might ask to do a intervention first. And so you'll meet after that intervention is conducted, and you'll have a meeting called like a response to intervention. And again, I'm speaking generally, so it might look different state to state, but it might just be, let's try these strategies first, and then let's have a meeting to determine what's been helpful, what's not been helpful. But that step can potentially be skipped. That's what happens generally, because if you go to your school and you say, I'm formally, and I always like to use that word formally, just in case you didn't know, maybe you thought I'm just speaking anecdotally or you're just, I'm using, but no, really, I know what I want and I'm being very articulate in what I'm asking for. And that is a child study. So I like to use the words formally so that it just kind of brings us all to the same place, because there is a formal process to it. And there, with that formal process, there are regulatory statutes, there's codes, there's guidance on how the school has to respond once that formal request has been made. Okay. So you're going to formally request. Now, instead of doing this over the phone, it's hard to have documentation and proof of what's occurring if you're having it in conversation. Definitely if you're doing it in person. Sometimes conversations happen and someone catches you on the phone, or you're at the school and it's just, oh, I got a busy schedule while I've got you in front of me. By the way, I really want this child study. And so things happen. If that happens to you, I always recommend that you follow up with an email just to review what was addressed, because you want that documentation. You're going to want those timelines and you want it documented when you asked for what, because with those formal requests come a formal deadline where the school has to respond in a certain time frame. Okay, and again, that can be nuanced a bit in your state. So you're going to want to look at the website, the Department of Education website on your state or your state. If you're in Texas, is going to be Texas Department of Education, Texas Department of Education, or it could be Missouri Department of Education. Now, the terminology might look a little bit different, but essentially, if you go to DOE's website, you plug in your state, it will take you to your state's website. If you have any question or confusion around what your state's calling their education services, State Education Service, Department of Education Services. Okay, so you're going to follow up with an email if you catch people in person and you're having these conversations around what you're formally requesting. But I recommend that you start with an email. So I am formally requesting a child study to evaluate my child's eligibility for services, special education services. Today, I'm not going to go into the difference between the possibility of an IEP versus a 504 plan. I can in another video, I'd be happy to. But there's so much information out there. My goal is really to kind of give you the strategies that are going to help you pass the barriers, past the sticking points that's keeping you from accessing these resources. But comment below, let me know if that's something you'd like me to do a video on as well. So you're going to ask for an evaluation, determine if your child's eligible for special education services. And I like to use the word formally, again, because we're all on the same page. Now, once you make that formal request, you're going to want to make sure that you have access in hand. You can ask the school for a copy. That's the Parents' Rights to Special Education. You can go to your state's website as well, education website, and get that access to the Parents' Rights to Education. And that's important because when you have these conversations, you want to be using the language that is as close or directly referencing the code, the laws around what are the regulatory guidelines specific to the the thing that you're asking for. So whether it's the child study, whether it is the eligibility meeting and so forth. So you want to make sure that you're using the language. So there isn't, oh, I thought you were just wanting to meet with me. No, I wanted to have a formal evaluation to see if my child is eligible for special education services. And with that, then there are triggers in place, regulatory triggers, where a process begins and people have to respond in a certain time frame. And when things aren't happening, then you want to use the language that's included in this parents' rights to special education, because as a parent, you know what your rights are. And I like to really call it, if you will, like the special, parents' rights Bible, if you will, so to speak, because it gives you all of that language, all of the guidance, information as you proceed through this process. All right. So that's one thing that you're going to want to do as well. Once you've hit that trigger and you've asked for the formal child study, you're going to make sure that you are well read on what the parents' rights to special education are. Read the laws surrounding that in your state. All right. So you've got a copy of that. Again, if you don't go to the website, go to your school and they have to provide you a copy. Well, specifically if you're getting those services, but they can provide you a copy as well in just hitting those triggers. Decide what it is, what you want. You're doing all of these things before the actual evaluation process begins and then before you get to the eligibility meeting. During all of this time, you are going to decide what it is you want. You've got your parents' rights to special education pamphlet. You are going to decide what you want. You do not want to go to this meeting just with the idea that I'm going to ask and see what everybody else thinks, because everybody's coming in with their own opinions. Hopefully they're coming in with their expertise as well, obviously, but sometimes it may be a short-sighted version of or vision of what you also see your child being capable of. And it's not necessarily obviously with malice or intentional. It's just our own experience that we each have with your child, right? The teacher's experience is going to be different with your child than yours as the parent, with the administrator, with the school psychologist that's coming in, the school social worker that's coming in to do the evaluation, the other teachers that have been working with your child. So you want to be filling in those missing pieces, and you're going to do that by figuring out ahead of time what you want. Is it that you think your child is eligible for an IEP and that's what you're working towards? Is it that, you know what, honestly, I just want my child to get some extra tutoring services or extra time to be able to get to class because they're taking said medication and it makes them tired sometimes. And so they need extra time to in between class and to not be penalized because they can't get to class fast enough because of this particular treatment they're receiving on school grounds. The spectrum is wide. So you have to decide what you think ideal world in the perfect setting. What would your child be getting? What do you want your child to achieve? So if you don't know, you might say, well, I don't even know what's available. Fair enough. In a perfect world, what would you want your child to achieve? Work backwards. I want my child to have achieved X, Y, and Z. And then think, what could potentially help them get there? And then get on the internet, start researching. And it doesn't mean that that plan has to happen because it may look completely different from where you start. But you want to be a player that comes in there, a team player, if you will, because it's collaborative. You are part of the team deciding what's going to be best for your child's academic success. And everybody's coming in there with strategies and recommendations, and you are too. You want to be able to do that too, as the person who knows your child the best. So, barring the fact that most of you probably aren't going to be teachers or in the school's academic, educational setting, although obviously there are some parents who are and have that background. If you aren't, you're not at a disadvantage. Get talking to people, go online and research, look at what, other people are doing around specific diagnosis. If your child's having a diagnosis or behavior you're noticing, it could be, when I say behavior, I don't necessarily mean conduct. It could just be, I'm noticing that when my child does this thing, they're struggling. When they're reading this, they are struggling to get the context. They're a good reader, but there's challenges with, context, or I notice memory issues. And so just be thinking about what are some things that could be helpful. So you've got your pamphlet, you're figuring out what you want to achieve. And now you want to figure out who are the resources or what are the resources that could help you. So I know what I want. Do I want to do more collaborative work with OT because I noticed that my child's having a difficult time turning in their work, or maybe they're turning their work in class, but they're missing lots of points because the teacher's having a challenge understanding what they're putting, their output, their writing, for instance, if it's a writing assignment. And so I think they could, do well to have services in school with an OT to help them with writing, for instance. So think about in the school setting who could be a person to help you, and it could be in consultation. It might be a actual service, if it's vision services, if it's occupational therapy services, if it's physical therapy services, if it's working with a reading specialist. There's a lot of different types of resources available. You want to be thinking about where you could get those resources and who you can talk to. And, think about who in the school and maybe even just thinking about in the community as well. If it's talking about occupational therapy, can I call a rehab practice and speak with an occupational therapist and get some ideas about what are the types of things that I could potentially see in OT that might be helpful for a child who has X, Y, and Z conditions or behaviors. So be thinking about that, the people and the resources that could be helpful. So the next thing you want to do we talked a little bit about this already. So you figured out who are the resources, what the resources are. You want to understand the state regulations and the parameters, what's available. And you've got the pamphlet. You maybe are reading the Individual Disabilities Education Act. Maybe if you want to kind of dabble in ADA a little bit, American Disabilities Act, that's a lot. But if you don't know where to even begin, consider looking at your state's advocacy. So in every state, there are organizations that they kind of work as intermediaries between the school and the parent, but honestly align themselves more with the parents in terms of giving you access to resources for your state and as it relates to education, Department of Education. So every state has at least one or a few, and I'll put the link in below. The name is escaping me right now, but they're educational advocacy organizations that work with parents. They're state funded and they provide those services to parents to help you to be able to better advocate for your child in the school setting. Now, prior to COVID, a lot of these organizations had people that could maybe even come to you and meet you for meetings. My experience is that's happening a lot less and less, but there's still wonderful resources. If they can't come to you in the meeting, that's fine. You can just getting on the phone and talking and getting that free consultation is well worth it. So once you get in touch, you reach out and see, have that consultation with them and see what strategies, things that maybe you hadn't thought about that they can offer to you concerning your child's needs and things that you're going to be advocating for and requesting. They can send you information. They can talk to you very specifically about what the guidance is and what the laws are around the special education need for your child. So talking to these organizations are just invaluable. I have worked with these organizations in my own state, and I have referred lots of families to these organizations in their state to get those additional resources. Now, if you decide that, I want somebody who I want to come with me to these meetings, then you're going to consider going to a private advocate where you're going to pay for those services. So that's an option as well. And of course, you can just research online. There are organizations or companies that will go out with you that will do the research. If hey, I don't even know where to begin. I'm busy. I have a lot of things that are happening in my family, and taking on the additional work of finding out what the laws are around my child's particular needs is an extra burden right now that would just be too challenging. So by all means, go find an advocate that's going to do that work for you and attend those meetings with you. So that's also an option. And of course, you're just going to want to research and do your own homework to see the quality of advocacy that you're getting from this provider. Ask other family members, ask people in community, join organizations that maybe have community groups that have parents who have children with special needs, and get in touch with some of the parents and find out who have they worked with. Do they know of these people? Because you want to make sure that you're vetting to see if it's going to be a good fit, and that it's Obviously not going to be wasting your money. So that's important. So that's an option as well. So you've made your request in writing, you've done your research, you've connected to resources in the school, or you've thought about it at least. Maybe you've consulted on the outside, a mirror example of what's offered in the school with someone on the outside in the community, for instance, OT versus OT in the community at a rehab provider's office to get some ideas, just a consultation, ideas on what might be available. And then you're going to, if you haven't, hopefully you've heard back from the school within, again, it's going to vary state to state a little bit, but within, usually it's within a certain set of days, right? So you're going to find that out. You're already going to know it. You know it already at this point. Maybe you haven't heard anything. It's getting close to the deadline. So you're going to remind those stakeholders, the administration, weekly until you hear something. Each time you're including in there what the regulations are and what the laws are around. And of course, none of this is adversarial because that just makes the whole experience more challenging. And ultimately, you're wanting to create an environment and cultivate an environment where everybody's working together in the best interests of your child. When you come from it from that standpoint and that approach, then it's just a matter of tweaking the communication and coming up with ideas versus sometimes that it can feel adversarial when there are some very complex and dynamic challenges on the table. It can become a bit more emotional, especially as a parent, because you love this child. This is your baby and you want the best for them. But it's really important and it's incumbent upon us to really slow down and make sure that we are also cultivating that environment where it is, if you will, although we don't work for the school system, collegial as much as possible, where we're equal in this. Though as a parent, again, I think the parents are one of the most important contributors, but we come in a collaborative way, working together for the best interest of the child. So you're using language to remind the school that we all have a deadline to meet and it's for the best interest of your child. And if those things aren't happening, and it's a lot less likely that you'll get a response now that you've formally request. It's in writing. You've been following up in writing in that email. If you got on the phone and or someone reached out to you and they say something came up, can we do this instead? You're following up in an email just so you have documentation of all of that. And then, but you hit that deadline, nothing has happened, then there are rights available to you for a complaint process, for mediation, for grievance processes if you haven't heard back from the school in a regulatory time frame. So that information will be in your state's Parents' Rights to Special Education that you'll already have and you're prepared for. But again, usually once you've done these things, my experience is that it's a lot less frequent that in this particular area that you don't hear anything because you've got the documents. And now if you need to, you're kind of building a case, so to speak, of the experience that your child and you have had in accessing your right to, or at least the evaluative right to those services. All right. So that being said, just to kind of wrap everything up, just a few tips. You're going to avoid making phone calls just because I've had a lot of families that have done that and there's just no record of anything. And it's just, sometimes it can become he said, she said. You want to avoid all of that. It's better for everybody. So avoid phone calls. But if you get a phone call, fine. People talk all of the time. Just make sure you follow up in an email and you're keeping a record of all those communications. Consider your state's disability advocacy group and seek consultation. See if they'll go with you to those meetings. If not, again, getting that information on the phone, see if they'll do a video appointment with you or if they'll come with you and video in on one of the meetings. That's great too. So that's another opportunity. Getting that private advocate if you want to. And then if all else fails, obviously you can consult with an attorney. And I would recommend that you research attorneys who specialize in special education. Obviously, there's going to be costs associated with that. So just like when you're finding a private advocate, you're going to want to do the same research, get out in those community boards, those forums, those groups, and talk to other parents, people, professionals that have interfaced with attorneys who have had some good successes and helping to clarify everyone's legal role in providing the required services and evaluative services for children who have special needs. depending on where you are in your journey. But someone who has that legal expertise can be very helpful. And of course, there's going to be costs associated with that, but you want the very best if you're going to put the money in, obviously, to get those services for your child. This is supposed to be a collaborative process. There's nothing worse, and you actually do yourself a disservice when you're coming in very adversarial, and it makes sense because trust me, as a parent myself, running into some very complex conversations with professionals, providers, and school providers as well, that you maintain composure and that you are clear in what the laws are and that you are using that language when you are making your requests now, because that's what you're there for. You're not asking for them to do anything outside of the scope of their expertise. You're just asking them to do what the law requires them to do. That precedence that's already been set before your child started attending school, if they're still in school currently. And they have a right. They have a right to those resources. And there's a reason why those laws were created for children with special needs, because they need them, right? And there's a lot of reasons surrounding that, but they need them. They're afforded. They have access. And we want to make sure that we use as much of what's available to us. In light of all the other challenges that our kids have to experience, being able to access free and appropriate public education should not be one of those. And so that's the very least that all of us can do in providing care and those resources educationally for a child. It's meant to be collaborative, really maintain that composure, be thinking about how you want to address the professionals. It should be collegial. It should be business. Like when you're addressing, you want to kind of have this business experience, because it is business. It's the business of getting that education for your child, and that it's making sure that everybody can hear everyone's contribution, especially yours. And so I would say those are probably the biggest keys, I think, to being able to get you the school from the no to the yes. The no, we're not going to provide these services. The no, I don't think your child needs to be evaluated. The no, I don't think your child would benefit from these resources, to the yes. And it is really essentially holding close to what's already been established, the laws that have already been established, but knowing them and getting it all written and documented, getting those chronological interactions in order on paper, so that you have that as you continue to advocate for your child. And then resourcing, tapping into those resources in the school and in the community where necessary. I hope that was helpful. I know that was a mouthful. I'd love to go a little bit into the weeds on the specific aspects. And if so, just let me know if there's something that just kind of came up for you and you said, I wish you'd go into more detail about that. Comment below. And then certainly if you have any other questions or topics you want me to cover, I'd love to hear those. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But thank you for joining us today. I look forward to going into more about how we can say yes, how we can continue on our journey toward what we've envisioned, the goals we've set for ourselves in the face of extraordinary circumstances. I'm Angel, and I thank you for joining me. Have a great day.